I'd like to welcome everybody. This is Sam Agressi with Renier Dealership Advisors, and welcome to May's webinar. This month we feature. We're going to discuss one major capital expenditure for many dealerships, and that's when they get the letter from the factory saying it's time to upgrade your facilities or maybe even build a new store. So today we have one of our strategic partners from Renier Construction, Bill Heifner and Brian Reynolds, to give us their insights, and they have in their process on how they address it and some things dealers should be considering when taking on these endeavors. These are very large capital expenditures, and cost overruns and things like that could be really important. So really excited to have Bill and Brian with us this month. And with that, I turn it over to Bill and Brian.
Thank you, Sam. Again, this is my name is Bill Heifner, and with me is Brian Reynolds. And thanks for the opportunity, Sam. This is really kind of a collection of some of the things that we've learned over the years about how to get the best return for your investment. And little background, I've been at this for quite a while, and really what got us into the business of building or refreshing dealerships is a personal passion for automobiles. I do some amateur sports car racing, but long story short, we've been involved in significant number of design build dealership projects, and we built up over the years a pretty significant client base. And so it's really been a learning experience, and we'd like to pass on some of the things that we've learned over the years to you.
And my name is Brian Reynolds. I have over 20 years of design and documentation experience as a registered architect, and over 10 of those years have been design build in the automotive field, and that has given me a lot of experience as a dealer advocate for almost all of the manufacturer image programs.
As you can see from the screen that's up now, we've over the years again been involved in, I think, all of them. Brian and I were taking notes yesterday and figured that I think we've hit all of them. So Construction Services 101, how to get the best return for your investment. And in this program this morning is really about getting the best return for your investment. And the analogy that I use is that two individuals purchase new automobiles. Just say, for example, they purchase two new Audis, and they each spend, say, $75,000 for a new Audi. And so the price that the individuals paid for their vehicles was the same, but one individual received maybe a premium sound system or an upgraded interior appointments. And so although the price was the same, the value that the individuals received was different. And so the message today is talking about how to get the best return for your investment. We'll talk about the types of construction agreements that there are. We'll compare the different types of contract agreements, finding a good design builder, minimizing risk, and the one thing that is always gets everybody's attention, how to negotiate with the contractor. So with that being said, some of the projects that Brian and I have been involved in over the years are up on the screen now. These are some local and some out-of-town projects. You'll probably recognize some of these over the years. So let's get going. So your goal really is you want to really grow your business, and to do that, that might require, as Sam said, an image program, or it could maybe even involve a new build. And so what we're going to do today is talk about some different programs that you can use to get the best return for your investment. So your goal, when you look at when you're in this situation, you want to minimize your risk. Of course, and we've learned over the years, minimize the construction timeline or the construction schedule. I've always said many times that the longer that a contractor is on site, especially during an image upgrade, usually is very disruptive. And in you'll find that having a contractor around sometimes affects your business because he's literally in your showroom doing image upgrades. So you want to minimize your construction timeline. But as I said earlier, you want to maximize the value for your investment. And that's really the key term that we're talking about this morning, is maximizing the value that you get for your investment. Because as Sam said, these are significant investments that you're making into your physical plant and into your dealership. So let's talk right now about the forms of construction contracts that you can enter into. The traditional contracting method, which I think has been around since they built the pyramids, is what's called design, bid, and build. And design, bid, build, you as an owner would enter into an individual contract with an architect and a builder. So you would hold two contracts. Our preferred method of contracting is called design, build, partnering, where you actually enter into a single contract with a single entity, typically a design builder.
The third option would be construction management. This would be the non-preferred method. Layers of project management staff, you're going to have excessive fees, and there's a lack of accountability with this method, and you'll find they'll find a lot of problems, and there'll be a lot of finger pointing. And probably the worst part is you won't know the project costs until after the project is completed.
I say that construction management's managing construction problems after they occur. Here's a timeline that looks and compares design, bid, build versus design, build, partnering. As you can see, the overall timeline on design, bid, build is longer than design, build, partnering. Of significant note is that typically in design, bid, build projects, quite honestly, you might not realize what the final construction cost is until after you finish the project. We believe in the design build world, if properly managed, you deserve to know what the project is going to cost before you start, rather than after you finish. So let's compare two ways to buy construction services. And we said earlier, we're going to compare design, bid, building versus design, build, partnering. In design, bid, building, you would sit down with an architect, and as Brian said, he is a registered architect, and he would sit down and listen to your needs, and you would say, well, my vision is to build a new dealership, and I've received requirements from the manufacturer, and I've received a design intent document, and it says it has to be so big, with so many cars in the showroom, so many cars in the service department, etc. The parts department needs to be so large. So working with your architect, then the architect would create schematic plans for the dealership, and then of course at some point you're going to want to know what this project costs.
Yeah, and really at this point, without the input from a general contractor, the architect's going to rely on pretty broad data, like means data, to try to figure out what this thing is going to cost. And that may not include the local construction climate.
So an architect prepares a budget for your project, and if the budget meets your expectation, then you would commission the architect to go ahead and prepare drawings, the actual construction drawings and bid documents, and he would then reach out in the business community and solicit competitive bids from general contractors.
Usually this is about the same time that the drawings would be sent back to the manufacturer that you're working with for their review as well.
to make sure that you're conforming to the manufacturer's requirement for their image program. I always say kind of the moment of truth, a certain amount of time passes and the bids come back and proposals from the various contractors to the architect, and the architect then compares the bids that he's received with the project budget. And this is an example that I'm showing now of an image program, numbers that were received by a dealer where he solicited proposals from 3 different design bid builders. And this was early on in a relationship that we had some time back, where we decided to go ahead and quote bid a project. And we were contractor number 3. Obviously, as you can see from the numbers, we were the successful contractor in bidding the project. That's the good news. The bad news is that the architect, and this wasn't Brian, I might add, this was another firm, that the architect had represented to the owner that the project could be built for $750,000.
Yeah, this can happen when designing in a vacuum without accurate cost data. And if you remember, if you've already sent drawings to the manufacturer, you've shown them something that maybe can't be built.
You're over budget, and you've decided that you have to go back and, as we call a value engineer, and pull cost out of the project. And value engineering to me means giving up things that you thought you were going to get as an owner just to get the project back in budget, because the architect's budget really wasn't accurate. So you find yourself at a crossroad. Do you increase your budget, or do you value engineer? And if you decide to value engineer, and as Brian said, you've already got your plans into the manufacturer, and there's an expectation that you're going to deliver what's on those drawings. And what you're finding is that if you decide to value engineer, you're almost back to the beginning of the whole process, and you've spent weeks, if not months, to get to this point. And the architect may step up and say, well, you know I was a little over budget or under budget on my estimate, but I've got to redraw. So now there's an expectation that the architect may want some additional expense to design the project for you. In this case, the owner finally said, I need all the things that were on the drawings. I'm going to increase my budget to $900,000. And he moved ahead and he wrote a contract to us. And at that point, kind of the fun begins, because as you can see from this example, our contract with the owner was $877,500. We went out in the marketplace and found trade contractors that had not submitted proposals to us, or that we hadn't seen, and we picked up additional profit in the project. And this, quite honestly, happens routinely in the design bid build world, and this is really additional profit for the contractor. The other thing that happens, and this is quite frankly kind of interesting, is there's this expectation that when you have general contractors pitted against each other, that you're going to get the best price. And I won't argue that, but I don't think you're going to get the best value, because the next thing that happens is that during the bidding process, the contractor may find things on the construction drawings that really needed to be included that weren't there.
Yeah, so at this point, your architect is going to start getting RFIs or requests for information. And those are questions from the contractor that are identifying, maybe shortcomings of the drawings. And ultimately, those will become change orders. The architect does not pay for the change orders. The contractor is not paying for the change orders, which leaves you as the owner.
When I look back over my years of experience in the construction business, I think that the reason that the construction industry, in a lot of cases, has received a not so favorable reputation is because of contractors taking advantage of owners with change orders. And here's a little example. I think if you can see this, the little dinghy behind the big boat says original contract, and then the large boat says change order. A little humor, but there's a message there, I think, to be had. So construction starts, there could be more change orders, project is completed, and once the project is completed, you realize what the project actually cost at the end of the process, not before you started construction, because of the number of change orders.
And those change orders we're talking about, historically contractor-driven change orders in the design bid build could be at an additional 6 to 8% to the contract.
So the other form, one that we embrace, and Brian and I both embrace in our business world, we call it design build partnering, the practical approach to building. The first box that we see here in this flow chart is similar to the one that you saw in the other example, except we've added a third party to this box, and that is the owner would sit down with the architect and the builder to review his needs, his construction needs. So you have a builder on board right from the beginning. This box is the same. The architect would create schematic plans, and the difference is, though, that the builder would develop a project budget rather than the architect, because as a builder you have current construction costs that you're looking at every day. What's drywall cost today, what's steel cost today, and you're loading that into your estimating database. That's current information based on current projects and what we're paying on, literally daily. When the builder, the design builder, then would sit down with the owner and the architect and review the budget and to find if the budget was in line with what the owner, you as the owner, would want to invest in the project. And you find yourself at a crossroads very quickly. If you're out of budget, then you're really only working with 2 or 3 sheets of drawings.
Yeah, usually at this point, you have not spent a lot of money on drawings. You've got a site plan, floor plans, and building elevations, enough to create that construction budget from.
The other thing that's important too at this stage is that you haven't submitted anything to the manufacturer that says that you are or are not going to comply with certain requirements, and you've not spent a lot of money to get to this point. And if you find yourself over budget or out of budget, it's quite normal to go through what we call a loop here on this screen that says you can test different forms of construction, different finishes to try to get the project within budget. And that's really important. And we feel that it's important, again, to know what the project's going to cost before you start rather than after you finish. So if you said, we'd say, okay, I think the budget's in line. The design builder understands the scope of work. You move forward. The next step would be not a construction agreement, but what we call a pre-construction agreement. And the pre-construction agreement says that the design builder is going to provide a host or a variety of services during the events leading up to construction. And the biggest thing that I've always said that it's important to manage the pre-construction schedule. You'll see that in a minute. But there's a variety of things that the design builder is looking at. He's investigating the site as the construction drawings are being produced. He continually is validating the budget to make sure that we're not drawing something that can't be built for the budget. Investigating utilities and construction schedule, and making sure again that ultimately that the project can be built for at or less than the budget. This is an example of a project development schedule. This is really important. This really drives the process. does two things. One, it lists all the milestones that need to be addressed in all the events that are leading up to construction. And as you can see, there's not only the construction documents, but building permits, estimating, contracting, also, certainly conformance with the manufacturer's requirements. So this is a very key ingredient to the whole construction, pre-construction event.
Yeah, so when you've sent those drawings to the manufacturer, you as the dealer are aware of the budget and the schedule.
So once with the pre-construction services agreement in place, and there's many different forms of that, then the design builder would be working with an architect to develop the construction drawings, the specification, and equally as important, the construction schedule. And we'll talk about the construction schedule in a minute. Once that work is complete, then we would, this is where the process is significantly different than design, bid, build. In this case, we're going to competitively bid the project, or your design builder would be competitively bidding the project, as you saw in the other example where, as I mentioned, that we went price shopping with trade contractors and picked up additional profit. In the design build scenario, that process is benefiting the owner or the client because those costs that are saved are passed on back to the owner and not the contractor. And everything has to be transparent in this event, 100% transparent. And here's an example of bids that were received on a project for asphalt paving, fencing, landscaping, concrete. And all this transparency then goes into putting together the final construction estimate for a project. And that has to be 100% transparent, including fees, et cetera. Once that work is complete, then and only then would you enter into a construction contract. And as you can tell, the process has occurred over, weeks and maybe a month or two, but you're actually doing all the front end and planning work leading up to construction. So the goal is really to minimize the construction schedule and minimize change orders. Construction commences, you complete the project, and you have single source accountability.
Yeah, if you recall the design, bid, build projects where you have a historical 6 to 8% in change orders in design build, you're looking at owner requested change orders, and historically those are less than 2%. So those are requested by the owner, not the contractor.
In a perfect world, in my estimation, that a perfect construction contract execution is building a building and having 0 change orders. You as an owner are entrusting this process to one entity, and that entity is responsible for the design as well as the construction. And I think it's really speaks well to collaboration. And again, looking at the timeline, design, bid, build is longer. The final project costs are established at the end of the project, not during before the construction commences. And then you can see from the example that the whole timeline is shorter for design, build. And really, it talks about accountability. You're holding the design builder accountable for design services, the construction drawings, building permits, making sure that the actual cost of construction conform to the budget, minimizing change orders, maximizing quality control, and living up with a firm completion date. No finger pointing, or as I call it, no hand grenade throwing at each other. Typically in a design bid build world, you'd have an architect in one corner, a contractor in another corner, and you as the owner is in the third corner. Everybody's pointing fingers at each other when things don't go right. If you look at Business First every week, and here in Columbus, you'll see usually really a disproportionate number of lawsuits that are filed on construction projects where the contractor selection is based strictly on price. And the same thing with mechanics liens. They're usually on public works projects or one where there was a design bid build project. And at the end of the job, then there was a disproportionate number of mechanics liens that were filed. So what do you look for when you're trying to find a design builder? Well, the easy thing is to try to find somebody that embraces design build partnering. He may or may not have in-house architectural and engineering services. He may have a staff of architect or architects and engineers, may not. If he doesn't, then he would acquire those services from an outside source. Has a good pre-construction program, like we talked about before, the schedule that sets the milestones and puts together a definitive timeline that says all these things that lead up to construction need to be completed, including getting the building permit before you start construction, because you don't want to get in the ground, you don't want to start construction until the plans are completed and you have a building permit, because when you come on site, what you're really trying to do is minimize the timeline. Everything has to be open book, cost accounting. There can't be any secrets. And again, can't stress enough this whole concept of single source accountability.
Yeah, that allows you as the owner to focus on your business and have one point of contact.
So when you're looking for a contractor, an easy way, a design builder, easy way to find one is to talk to your accountant like Sam, of course, your banker or a lawyer. You need to confirm the financial stability of the company. As I said earlier, you can look for a number of mechanics liens that are filed, and if you find the design builder's name that turns up periodically in public documents, that's not a good sign. Talk to past customers, of course, and I even say sometimes you might want to interview your design builders, trade contractors, to see how they're being treated by the design builder. The fun part, how do you negotiate with a contractor? So I'm telling you what it looks like from the other side of the table, and this is kind of like, some hopefully good information. The relationship really has to be a partnership. Maybe not a business, well, it is a business partnership, but it needs to be a partnership where it's a team effort. There has to be trust between you, the owner, and the design builder. Can't be any secrets, and it's really, again, as I said earlier, it's a team effort. There's also, it's important early on to determine what kind of a contract you're going to use with your design builder, and there are design build agreements from the American Institute of Architects, and those documents are readily available. Sam and his firm have seen them normally, quite naturally. So agree on any special contract language, any special conditions. It's sometimes design builders are asked to provide additional services like install shop equipment or do work hand in hand with manufacturers, preferred sign vendors to purchase and install brand signage. But most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, is to enter into a fixed price lump sum contract. And a lot of people will say, well, contractors will say, well, we'll do it cost plus, or we'll do it as a guaranteed maximum price and we'll split the savings. It's a recipe for disaster, because in both of those scenarios, you'll never know what the project costs until you finish. Also, it's important to, before you get too far into a relationship with your design builder, is to agree on fees. There's fees for design services. There's fees for pre-construction services. And that's all the events that lead up to starting construction. It could be site investigation, environmental investigation, soil testing, utility, evaluation, etc. There's a fee the design builder will have for supervision that should be listed in his construction estimate, covering company overhead, and I guess sometimes the word that people struggle with, and that's profit or a fee for taking the risk. It is a high risk business. It's high risk in the sense that you're dealing with soil conditions, you're dealing with weather conditions, you're dealing with safety issues, and so there should be an incentive in this relationship for your design builder to move forward. I've always said, look at the big picture. As Sam said earlier, this could be one of your largest capital investments, and too many times clients that I run into are looking strictly at the fees that are being charged by an architect or a design builder, with really very little regard for the biggest portion of the project cost, which is the hard cost, which is sometimes 85 to 90% of their overall construction agreement. And so yes, be aware of the fees that are being charged, but also you need to be working with your design builder to help get the hard cost in line and to keep the project on track. As this little example says, that over the life cycle of a building, that contractors and design fees account for less than 1% of the building life cycle cost. My favorite portion of this as we wrap up this morning is understanding the difference between price and value. The price is what you pay, value is what you get. As we said earlier, I used the example of two people that are buying a new Audi. They both paid the same price, but they got different value. And this was, quite frankly, a good example that I was personally involved in. I was building a new luxury car dealership and also a service center with it. And we had looked at the project and we said, given the complexity of it, that it was a 10-month schedule. However, the owner wants it in 150 days or 5 months. And I said, wow, that's kind of a significant challenge. And Brian and I actually worked on this project together. What we did was we put together, we had the construction drawings were finished, and we had the specifications finished, and we put together then a 5-month construction schedule. And I talked earlier about the importance of the construction schedule. In this case, when we bid the project with the trade contractors, we said, look, we're going to do this project in 150 days. And you're bidding to not only the drawings that specify what needs to be built and the specifications on how it's going to be built, but you're also bidding to the schedule. We're going to work this project 2 shifts a day, 6 days a week. We're not going to pay you any premium time or overtime. We added a superintendent to run the night shift. The project was about a little bit over $4 million. We never bid it with a 10-month schedule, so we don't know what that cost would have been. We bid it with a 5-month schedule, and we ended up, getting the contract in place with an owner. So I don't know what the delta was between the 10-month schedule and the 5-month schedule, but I'm guessing it was about a 5% premium to accelerate it, which was about a little bit over $200,000. So when you do an analysis, the price to accelerate the schedule was $212,000, but the value that the owner received for early completion was, well, we finished it 5 months early. We saved 5 months of quote general conditions or what's the supervision. It reduced the construction interest on the carry of the bank loan by 5 months. And the big benefit was that the dealership opened 5 months early. And let's just say that the dealership was generating a gross of $50,000 a month. Then you can see from the example that the owner actually saved by accelerating the schedule $182,000 by forcing the design builder to get in high gear and build the thing in 5 months. If the monthly gross was $100,000 a month, then the net savings was over $400,000. So again, price is what you pay, but value is what you get. Price is important, and that's a measuring point, but value is much more significant. So in closing, for your next construction project, identify a reputable design builder. develop a relationship of trust and confidence, negotiate a fixed price lump sum contract, hold the contractor to an aggressive schedule, and most importantly, and Brian's really good at this, is hold the contractor accountable for the project budget versus the final contract price, the construction documents, the quality of construction, minimal change orders, and as you can see from the previous example, the completion date. So, in conclusion, when you're contemplating either new construction or renovation of an existing facility, enter into a design build contract to minimize your risk and maximize your return on your investment.
Well, thank you, Bill and Brian. Thanks for that's very informative. I know that's a key thing. Is I wish always when I see dealers going through a major construction project, you always see you often see a dip in operations, and that's because they have to babysit the project, or they try to self GC the project, and you always see a hit to the store's operations. To have a good contractor, I can't emphasize enough, that could take care of a lot of those issues that come up during a major construction project. We do have time for a couple questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the questions we have are, what are some key things to consider versus doing an image upgrade versus a new store?
That probably will be driven by what the manufacturer's requirements are in terms of number of cars required in the showroom, the size of the parts department, and certainly the number of lifts or service bays in the in the shop area. Brian?
Yeah, the other key thing is to how can we keep you fully operational during construction, and we'd work a lot with you and your staff to make sure that they were aware of the phasing that's going on to be in and out of there and create the least amount of disruption as possible in those image upgrades.
As I said earlier, every day that you have a contractor in the midst of your operation, it's costing money, and the idea is to get in and get the work done and get out. To answer, I guess, a little more directly, Sam, it's really going to be driven by the manufacturer's requirements. I think you'll find that in some image upgrades you can add on to an existing facility. Sometimes it's marginal, and an owner will say, I don't want the disruption. I'm going to build a new facility, and I'll take the current facility and turn it into a pre-owned store.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thanks, Bill and Brian. Another question. In working with the manufacturer, what kind of flexibility do you see when doing an image upgrade? How much flexibility do you see the manufacturer leeway they're giving you?
I'm going to let Brian answer this. He's the architect.
Well, I jokingly say it depends on how German they are. That's not always the case, but really, I think the key is to work with the dealer and find out what their needs are first, and then go to the manufacturer. Begin the negotiations with what works best for the dealer. It really varies. I mean, you can run everything from people who are pretty reasonable to aligning tile joints with glass mullions at great expense. So
yeah, we saw early on. I mean, the first in 1988, we went to Chicago and we saw the Lexus dealer, the Lexus building for the first time, and it was a concept from Toyota, and we believe then that Lexus really was the first to develop an image program. They followed suit with the Toyota Image USA program, and then Honda jumped on. All those image programs that went through like certainly a transition and an upgrade, or an evolution, I guess I want to say. But you'll find that all the manufacturers have different requirements, and it really takes somebody with some experience to get through and try to be an advocate for a dealer to build this absolute minimum that they can, but still fulfill the manufacturer's requirements. But as Brian said, it depends on how German they are.
But I think that's all we have time for today. I want to be respectful of people's schedules, and I really appreciate Bill and Brian coming down doing the webinar this month. And if you have any other questions, we'll have the contact information to contact Bill and Brian directly. Again, Renier is a great strategic partner of ours, and we enjoy working with them, with our dealer clients. So please join us next month when we're going to discuss captive insurance and how to maximize it, and versus reinsurance and captive insurance. And it's really a good tool to use when used properly, and we look forward to that. So thanks again, and thanks for joining us.